Boy, the risk today is that, I don't know if you've been at all listening, but today has been epic. And like every announcement and even like the things that are casual offhand comments have been just hitting me and feeding my soul. I'll never look at that picture again. You ever see a piece of art like that and go, I've seen that thing 1,000 times. How come I never saw? The lions are looking at their king, and he didn't turn his back on a lion. All hail the Lion of Judah. He's just smart enough to know if you're going to fear, don't fear the one that can just kill the body, man. Fear God. And the lions are like, us too. We're not crazy. We know our mate. So anyway, the whole thing, and then, this epic battle for your children's souls raging on and all that. So I run the risk of sort of getting in the way. And all I want to do here is hopefully get out of the way. Bob already preached my sermon. Well, that's it. That's the message. It's not about the tithe. It's not about legalism. It's about the heart. It couldn't have put it better. My daughter is, by the way, you think, man, I'm kind of new here. I haven't been here a very long time. You guys remember before I had any kids? Remember it was just me rolling? Yeah, Katie turned 4 last week. She's 4. We're old, guys. She turned... Isn't that unreal how long I've been here? Yeah, it's not possible. Anywho, Valentine's Day a couple weeks ago, and we told her to give Valentine's to everybody you love. And at the same time, we're trying to teach her to tithe. And so Jackie and I are thinking, we got to teach, because we teach the tithe to our children. So when they take up a little offering in children's church, if we give Katie $1, we give it in dimes, because a dime out of $1. Why? Because 10% is the amount you're supposed to get to and then check that off? No, because 10% is the floor. And we want to teach her, it's a lot harder to get to that floor, to get to that baseline, if you start with no percent. Then you get to be an adult and you're like, whoa, I could never get to 10 or whatever. But if you start at 10, then the sky's the limit. 100's the limit, but you get the idea. And anyway, what does that have to do with Valentine's? About that same time, a couple weeks ago, she's doing Valentine's and giving Valentine's to everybody she loves. And she says, and now this one's for God. We were like, yeah, I know. Oh. But now Jackie and I are in this big theological quandary, like, be mine, God? What does it say? What could it mean? And we're trying to piece all this together. Do you give a Valentine to God? Theologically, how does this work and everything? And of course, Jackie and I were like, yes, But that's the difference, I think, between Old Testament legalistic tithing and giving. It's the difference between a dime out of $1, and Valentine. It's like what you said. It's the heart. And I don't want to be the guy who's like, well, I made it to 10%, check. I want to be the guy who says, look, if the Old Testament, that's the tithe, that's 10%, that's a great place to start. But I want, where my treasure is, my heart will be also. And I want I know that feeling. It took me a while to figure out LIPER. It's LIPA for Long Island. All right, yeah, LIPER. LIPAR. I kept scratching my head. But the R is just, that's vernacular. But that's it. I don't want to be the guy, for me it's Con Ed, but it's the same con. I don't want to be the guy who is always, I'm kidding. I don't want to be the guy who's always doing that, and my heart is always in Nissan and Visa and MasterCard and all that stuff. I want to be the guy who's still giving Valentine's, and that's it. It's about my heart. Now, you said it better than the way I had it framed to say, but I've got this time to fill, and I want to nonetheless say it. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm saying, listen, he's not the only one. Multiple people will say that. What great joy as I've gotten a hold of giving. So I want to talk about money today. But if that makes you uncomfortable, I want to talk about stewardship. But really, I just want to talk about money. And I do this every year at my church. And so I sort of experimented on my church. And everybody's still coming. Everybody's still alive. And so now and so I put part 1 because I did it in a multiple part at my church. And so if the Lord leads and we're having a good time with this, maybe we'll follow up with part 2. But talk about money for 2 reasons. One sort of practical and one very spiritual. The practical reason is at the beginning of the year, I think it's a great time to talk about stewardship because people have finances on their minds. A lot of people, you did New Year's resolutions. You remember the New Year, right? You did New Year's resolutions about finances. The W-2s come in. Many of you are doing your taxes right now. Maybe you did some year-end giving and you got that statement or whatever. For some of you, you maybe overspent a little in the holidays, and now the credit card bill you're paying now for Christmas 2012. You're like, that was so long ago. And so we talk about money on a practical matter. The other thing is more of a spiritual matter, and I can assure you. Let me just start right here. Anytime, maybe you haven't been to City on a Hill in a while. In fact, maybe this is your first time here at City on a Hill Church. I don't want to say welcome to you. I'm glad you're here, but I know what you're thinking. Part of the reason you didn't want to come to church, and part of the reason you haven't been coming to church for years, is because every time you come to church, all they talk about is money. And the first thing I say is, I want to talk about money, and you're like, oh, right? But hear me out. I know that it can be awkward to hear a preacher talk about money. And I know that can be very, very awkward. But I just want to assure you on this. I can be awkward on any topic. So it's not just money. Like if you feel really uncomfortable and go, that was weird, you should hear my other sermons. Like that. I don't really get any style points on sermons or preaching. My job is that you would do these things, that we not just be hearers of the word, but you would do it. And so I'll do whatever it takes, even if I have to be a little gimmicky. And that leads me to the title of my sermon, How to Be Rich. Now, I think we are told every single day of our life we get advice on how to get rich. But notice carefully, this isn't how to get rich. This is instructions on how to live, like how to be once you're rich, okay? So here's how to be rich, because here's my concern. Some of you might be rich, and you don't know how to do it. There are good rich people, and there are bad rich people. There's a way to be bad rich people, and there's a way to be good at being rich. So I want to make sure for those of you who are rich, how to be rich. The others of you, you're trying to get rich, so who's going to help you once you cross that line? And how will you really know when you've crossed that line? Does that ever happen? Does that ever happen? Has anybody been like, I got a number, it's my goal, and I'm going through, and then boom, one day, Friday, payday, there I go. I just crossed the line. I went not rich. Rich. Sup, world? It happened. I can point to the day it happened. Nobody says that, right? So how will you know if you get rich? And some of you are like, man, I'm not rich at all. I'm the opposite of rich. I'm a college student or whatever. Well, you're majoring in rich, right? You're on a path to try to hopefully get some income. One last confession. I'm a big fan of Andy Stanley. He's a preacher at North Point Church in Atlanta. If that name sounds familiar, you might be thinking of Charles Stanley, which is this much more slow-talking father out of Atlanta. Both great preachers, both just tremendous preachers. And I got the idea and a lot of this material from Andy Stanley. And you can go. I won't be offended at all. If you would rather hear how Andy preaches it to his people down south, just go to northpoint.org, Google how to be rich, and be like, man. So I tell you that I was blessed by this, richly blessed. And so I want to pass that on to you. And there's no shame in my game telling you he does it better than me. But I was moved by it, and I want to share it with you. So that's coming from the heart. On a more practical note, it's also important when you're preaching this, to give credit where credit is due. If nothing else, for this reason, I don't want you one day to be, thumbing along sermon podcasts and see Andy Stanley, How to Be Rich, and then suddenly be like, what? And send Andy this angry email. You are ripping off Tom Richter's stuff. Send, That's going to be so awkward. Because turns out I'm ripping off his stuff. Is everybody clear on that? All right. But we're both supposed to be ripping off the Bible. And right? We're both taking the scriptures. So turn with me to 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy 6. And let's talk about how to be rich. Everybody's telling you how to get rich, but who's going to help you learn how to be rich once you cross that wonderful line from not rich to rich? Here we go. 1 Timothy chapter 6, and we're going to read 17 through 19. Here we go. A little bit of background. Paul has been talking about money a lot, and the love of money is the root of all evil, and those verses are in there. The godliness with contentment is great gain. Those verses in there. He's been talking a lot about money, and mainly this is Paul teaching his young mentee Timothy. He's teaching him how to preach, especially how to preach to these rich people. And so he gives some advice, and this is very interesting because a lot of the Bible sort of applies to everybody. You were created in the image of God, all sin and fall short of the glory of God. This is very specific. In 1 Timothy 6:17, he's saying, command a very specific group of people. That's very interesting what it says. Command those, Paul's telling Timothy, here's how to deal with this. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they'll lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Command those, I want you to look back at verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present world. What's Paul saying? He's saying, look, I get it. Rich people have a very specific set of problems, and God loves rich people. And so he wants to help. He loves them no more, no less than poor people or middle-class people or somebody in between. And so he wants to help you. He wants you to have some advice, too, on how to be rich. And so he starts, command those who are rich in this present world. And that's where I've lost most of you. Right? This is the problem. Who is that? Command those who are rich in this present world. Some of you are already thinking, well, I can tune out the rest of this sermon and all future sermons about this topic. I'm telling you, these verses are specifically for rich people. Now, raise your hand. Is that you? Right? Exactly. Nobody. Right? That's one of this is my point. Who are these verses intended for? Because they're there in the Bible. They're written for somebody. Paul was a guy who knew something about riches. He lost it all when Christianity became illegal. So who are these verses for? The answer is no one. Right? Obviously, they're for no one. And I think when Timothy preached them the first time, these verses were for no one. See, one of the crazy side effects of being rich is denial that you're rich. Isn't that something? There's almost a stigma about it. You wouldn't be ashamed if I said, raise your hand if you're tall. And you're sitting there 6'3". Raise your hand if you're tall. No, I'm